The usual way of thinking about young people was, what can we do for young people? What can we do to young people? How can we entertain them more? How can we control them when they get out of line?
This goes back to the early 1990s, and in Minnesota at the time there was a growing crime problem, and there were predictions that this demographic boom of young people without things to do was going to continue the crime trend in a very negative direction. Focusing solely on the criminal justice end of the prison system was a waste of money and a waste of human capital, not just financial capital, because we were writing off a lot of our young people, and we didn't feel that that was appropriate to write people off.
There was a lot of lecturing about, oh, youth today don't care, etc. Well, my thought was, if you want to berate, don't you also have a certain responsibility to provide opportunities to let people prove themselves? There's nothing more special than someone who says, gee, I'm tired, I'm old, what use do I have anymore? And we say, come on over here, help this kid learn to read. And it's just like they're reborn. I do have utility, I'm valuable to society regardless of my age.
We're saying to you, when you test the waters of the Mississippi River, when you tutor a person in the Minneapolis public schools, when you visit an elderly care center and write an oral history of somebody in Chanhassen, what you're doing is you're reflecting the fact that you're needed.
When you're talking about helping people who are in poverty, helping young people learn to read, helping adults become literate, those are public goods. And we ought to be willing to say that because good things come out of it in the end, the government, the public, our taxes can help fund our efforts.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
First thing I did actually was, after I started talking with some people, is take out a flip chart, and I wrote down that this would be a domestic Peace Corps. And at the bottom I said, it's like JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And I took that around to meetings with me, and everyone said, yeah, it's a great idea, keep working on that. Howard Ornstein was a key player in all of this.
Andy Dawkins and I were friends at the time, and we often had discussions about public policy and about problems in our community. We both represent districts in St. Paul.
It was clear that I was going to do a lot of the legwork, but that Howard was going to be the savvy behind the scenes figuring out a roadmap for us to be successful. This bill was all about youth. It was a bill that was written by youth, named by youth. Everywhere I went I said, but we got to have a name for this program, and I just kind of call it the Minnesota Peace and Power Corps, but that's not going to be its name. Has anybody got any good ideas? And I wish I would have gotten the fellow's name, but somebody at North High raised their hand and said, why don't you call it Youth Works? Well, it's been Youth Works ever since. It was, again, Howard's great brain power that came up with the idea that instead of being like most of the other legislators who took an early spring break and went skiing in Colorado or did things like that, that we should have a tour of Minnesota with our idea, with House File 2. And by the time we got done, we had 17 legislators that were all enamored with our idea, and so the momentum was starting to build. So I was very proud of the Minnesota legislature passing this in May of 1993 into law with the $5 million, and then watching what Congress did with this.
We had all this excitement when the National Community Service Trust Act was first introduced to the Congress in May of 1993. It was a very fascinating summer as the bill took shape with a lot of input, and Minnesota was really given a lot of input to this.
Whenever folks in Congress can say, well, we've seen a state program, we know it works, they can then use that to convince their colleagues that this is money well spent. And I think that we had some small role in the national success.
There were 3 U.S. senators on the legislation of 1993 that created AmeriCorps. Senator Kennedy was the primary sponsor. The 2 second-tier sponsors were Senator Wellstone and Senator Dernberger. Basically, what we at NYLC did with Senator Dernberger was expose him to people who were doing good things that worked, and give him a context in Minnesota from which he could build federal legislation.
Could we hear now, please, from Mary Noble? We'd be glad to hear from you.
Okay, thank you. Chairman Kennedy, Senator Kassenbaum, members of the committee, I speak to you today as a K-8 educator, and what that means is...
I was invited to come to Washington, D.C. to testify before Congress, the Human Services Committee. Senator Dernberger took us to breakfast that next morning. So we invited him to our school. We told him to come out and we'd show him all the service projects that were going on. So not thinking any more about it, I get this call from John Schrader, and he says, the senator wants to come to your school. When can you accommodate him? I said, well, when does he want to come? At the time, Webster had a student body of 850 students, and I think over 30 different languages were spoken in the home. But the common language for all of us was the learning of service and cooperation. I think he really understood what we were talking about by incorporating the volunteerism and the service with the learning. I think he truly understood what we meant by service learning, that it's just not volunteerism.
It's the turn-on that education should be, but isn't. You know, the Citizens League did this recent study saying more than half the kids in the Minneapolis public schools who start the 9th grade don't make it out the other end. Why not? Because they can't get excited about educating. Every one of the kids I met in Mary Noble's classroom, in one way or the other, who was engaged, had gotten excited through service to somebody else.
So it was Dernberger's exposure to the program at Webster Open School in Minneapolis with Mary Noble that he really got it. And then he took it to the floor of the Senate, and you'll find it in the congressional record that Dernberger's contribution was based on direct experience with young people in the state of Minnesota.
You have to remember that none of this happens without leadership, and none of this happens without examples, and all of those are Minnesota's.
So we come back to the session in 1994, Howard and I, and say, geez, now we don't want to administer an AmeriCorps program and a YouthWorks program when they're so similar. So we changed the Minnesota legislation in 1994 to mesh with the federal legislation so we could have one Minnesota Commission on National and Community Service administer both programs as one.
I think it's important that it provides continuity in the matching funds that are required to the federal funds to have a state base that does not ebb and flow. We can plan ahead. We can build the infrastructure. Young people can count on this when they graduate from high school or graduate from college. This will be here because Minnesotans are committed to it no matter what happens in the country. This is here to stay.
In Minnesota, the larger movement has always been a comprehensive movement that included K-12, college, and YouthWorks AmeriCorps opportunities for young people. The idea was that we can reach young people at every stage of their development with opportunities to serve, thereby increasing the possibility that they will become lifelong citizen leaders.
You can have an individual citizen decide that they want to be a volunteer for their community and go out and do many things, but if you want to have a Peace Corps, you have to have an operation, and if you want to have a YouthWorks program, you have to have someone to run it. We need to have a champion at the legislature. We need to have the continuity of how this fits with the broader service movement around the country, and so that's what the Minnesota Commission is all about.
Well, I think the commission is important because it brings together citizens from different walks of life to give direction to this program. We have people of different ages, different ethnic backgrounds, coming from all different walks of life. And I think this is the strength of this kind of commission.
I think it represents an historical moment, the evolution of more authority out to the states, but also represents some real thinking of, if we want to make this really effective, let's make sure that it's responsive to local needs. And the way to do that is to have common citizens appointed by the governor, help steer the program, set up operating guidelines, etc.
Minnesota has always had as a major part of its vision, in fact a central part of its vision, the notion that K-12 collegiate YouthWorks AmeriCorps, Senior Corps programs belong under the same umbrella. And that is a national service umbrella that mobilizes a whole variety of folks that aren't as well mobilized as they might be to solve, to address community challenges throughout the state of Minnesota.
Giving just a moment of your time can mean so much to someone else, and you can help someone else. And it makes such a difference, I mean, in so many different ways and levels.
I guess as far as service goes, it's just like helping other people, like along the way, and just helping them get to where they need to go.
I think some people don't even realize that they were helped along the way. I mean, sometimes it takes like 10 years for you to look back and say, okay, you know what, there's this one teacher who really changed my life, and you have to really think about it. So I don't think everybody does, but I think everybody should, regardless if you're being helped or not, because no matter where you are in life, somebody helped you get there.
I'm just incredibly lucky, and I was born in the U.S., born in this family that was incredibly supportive and encouraging, and just had all these opportunities presented towards me.
And I would just like to return the favor to some kids who maybe don't have an older sister or someone like that to walk them through it.
I want to kind of level the playing field as much as possible. I help level the playing field, bring people up to be as lucky as I am. And I can't do it all, but I can definitely do something.
Well, I think it needs to be said that we're taping this on September 11, 2001, and it's a day that we all learned how much more we need to redouble our efforts to having world peace. It's the day that the World Trade Center was crashed into both towers, and I think that to try to tap the idealism of young people, to get involved in peaceful efforts to make the world a better place is really what this is all about, to have people feel like they have control over their destinies, to be able to shape the world and to shape it better. And so it's to allow those kind of opportunities is what this is about.